What does an iron ore mine in Michigan, a rubber plantation in Brazil, and a fleet of cargo ships on the Great Lakes have to do with a car in your driveway? In the early 20th century, for one company, they were all just apartments. Cogs in a single, colossal machine. Most companies today are specialists. They do one thing well and rely on a global network of other specialists for everything else. They buy parts, hire shippers, and sell through retailers. It's efficient. It's flexible. But a handful of the most powerful corporations in history rejected this idea entirely. They chose a different path. A harder, more expensive, and far riskier path. They chose to own everything. This strategy is called vertical integration. It's the decision to control not just your product, but the entire chain of events that creates it. From the raw earth to the customer's hands. It's a strategy that built empires. Henry Ford used it to put the world on wheels. Netflix used it to conquer Hollywood. Apple used it to create the most profitable product in human history. Yet for every success, there are countless failures. It's a strategy that can lead to immense power, but also spectacular collapse. So, how does owning your entire supply chain give a company an almost unbreakable competitive advantage? And if it's so powerful, why isn't everyone doing it? That's the question we're answering today. To understand vertical integration, we have to start with a man who perfected it on a scale the world had never seen. In the early 1900s, the auto industry was chaotic. Suppliers were unreliable, quality was inconsistent, and costs were unpredictable. Henry Ford saw this chaos not as a problem, but as an opportunity for control. His solution was the River Rouge complex in Dearborn, Michigan. It wasn't just a factory, it was an industrial ecosystem. At one end of the complex, massive docks received Ford-owned ships. These ships carried iron ore from Ford-owned mines and coal from Ford-owned collieries. They even brought lumber from Ford-owned forests. This raw material was fed into Ford's own steel mills and glass furnaces. The steel was shaped in Ford's stamping plants. The car bodies were assembled, fitted with engines, and rolled off the line, sometimes in less than 48 hours after the raw iron ore arrived at the docks. This is classic backward integration. Ford wasn't just assembling cars, he was moving backward up the supply chain to own the sources of his materials. The benefits were enormous. First, cost control. By owning the mills and mines, Ford cut out the middleman's profit margin at every step. He wasn't subject to price gouging from a supplier. Second, supply security. While his competitors waited for delayed shipments of steel, Ford's furnaces never went cold. He controlled his own destiny. Finally, quality and speed. Ford could innovate his steel-making processes to produce better, cheaper materials specifically for his cars. This tight feedback loop between materials and manufacturing was impossible for his rivals. But Ford didn't just integrate backward. He also integrated forward. He owned the dealership network that sold his cars and the financing company that provided the loans. He controlled the entire process, from mine to showroom. For a time, this made Ford untouchable. But this total control, its greatest strength, would eventually become its greatest weakness. The world changed, but Ford's massive, inflexible system couldn't change with it. Let's fast forward nearly a century. The supply chain isn't made of iron and steel, but of data and intellectual property. In the early 2010s, Netflix was a distributor. They were like a digital video store. Their core product was content created by other companies, major film studios and television networks. Their position was precarious. Their business model depended entirely on licensing deals with their direct competitors. Studios like Disney, Warner Brothers, and NBC Universal were realizing they could just launch their own streaming services and cut Netflix out completely. Netflix was facing an existential threat. Their suppliers were becoming their rivals. So, they made a massive gamble. In 2013, they released House of Cards, a show they didn't license, but produced themselves. It cost them a reported $100 million for 2 seasons. It was a staggering risk. This was a brilliant act of backward vertical integration. Instead of just being the store that sold the content, Netflix decided to become the factory that made it. The strategic advantages were immediate. First, supply security. With Netflix originals, no one could take their hit shows away. Stranger Things and The Crown would never leave Netflix to go to a competitor. This created a library of exclusive content that became the primary reason to subscribe. Second, cost control over the long term. While licensing fees are perpetual expense, owning a show means you control it forever. The initial investment is high, but the asset is permanent. Third, data-driven production. Netflix had a crucial advantage over traditional studios. They knew exactly what their audience watched. They could use this data to greenlight projects with a higher probability of success, tailoring content to specific tastes. By integrating backward into production, Netflix transformed from a fragile distributor into a global entertainment powerhouse. They secured their supply chain by building it themselves. Our final example shows how vertical integration isn't just about physical materials or digital content. It can be about controlling an entire technological ecosystem. Think about the iPhone. Apple's competitors, for the most part, are assemblers. They buy processors from Qualcomm, operating systems from Google, and sell through carriers like Verizon or AT&T. Apple does something radically different. First, they practice backward integration by designing their own core technologies. The most important of these is the silicon. The A-series chips in iPhones and the M-series chips in Macs are designed in-house by Apple. This gives them an incredible performance advantage. They aren't using an off-the-shelf component available to everyone. They design the hardware and software together, creating a seamless experience and efficiency their rivals can't match. They control the brain of their product. But they also practice powerful forward integration. This is about controlling the distribution and customer relationship. Where do you buy an iPhone? Often, at an Apple store. Apple controls the retail experience down to the lighting and the type of wood used for the tables. They don't leave their brand identity in the hands of a third-party retailer. And most importantly, they control the software distribution through the App Store. Any developer who wants to sell an app to an iPhone user has to go through Apple, who takes a cut of the revenue. This gives them immense control over the user experience and creates a massive, high-profit revenue stream. This combination of backward integration, chips, and forward integration, retail, App Store, creates what is known as a walled garden. Once you're in the Apple ecosystem, it's very difficult to leave. Your apps, movies, and messages all work seamlessly together, creating high switching costs. So, we've seen three titans, Ford, Netflix, and Apple, use vertical integration to dominate their industries. But they all did it differently. Ford controlled physical assets. Netflix controlled creative assets. Apple controls technological and retail assets. And this brings us to the core insight. The secret of successful vertical integration isn't about owning everything. That was Ford's eventual mistake. His system was too rigid and too capital-intensive to adapt to changing consumer tastes. The secret is about identifying and controlling the most critical, value-creating, and highest-risk parts of your supply chain. It's a strategic choice, not a totalizing ideology. For Netflix, the biggest risk was losing access to hit shows. So they took control of producing them. They still license plenty of content, but they own the assets that are essential for their survival. For Apple, the most important part of the user experience is the interplay between hardware and software. So they took control of the chip design and the operating system. They don't manufacture their own screens or memory, because those components are commodities. They control the parts that make an iPhone an iPhone. That's the aha moment. Vertical integration isn't about building a bigger factory. It's about building a deeper moat. It's about looking at the long chain of value that delivers your product and asking, what is the one link in this chain that I cannot afford to let a competitor control? And then, you buy it. You build it. You own it. You control your destiny by controlling what matters most. The strategy of vertical integration fundamentally trades flexibility for control. Most businesses choose to be flexible. They stay lean, they outsource, and they adapt quickly to market changes. This is often the smart choice. But integrated companies make a different bet. They sacrifice flexibility to gain immense power and stability. They spend billions to build systems that are difficult to copy and moats that are almost impossible to cross. When it works, it creates a dynasty. When it fails, the entire empire can crumble under its own weight. It teaches us a critical business lesson. Understand your value chain. Know which parts are simple commodities and which parts are the core of your competitive advantage. True strategic insight lies in knowing the difference. It's one of the most powerful and dangerous tools in the strategist's toolkit. If you learn something new, hit the like button and subscribe for more strategy breakdowns. And let us know in the comments, what company's strategy should we unlock next?